The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony on Kepler 442b as Jake Morrison walked through the settlement. He nodded to the Zephyrian workers with their blue skin and tall, thin bodies. They moved with precise steps, never wasting motion. Jake had learned to respect their efficiency over the past 3 years, even if he found their rigid ways exhausting. "Morning, Commander," called out Pete Johnson from the equipment bay. The stocky engineer was already covered in grease, working on a broken hauler. "Morning, Pete. How are the machines holding up?" "Better than expected. The Zephyrians know how to build things that last." Jake smiled and continued toward the education center. His wife Lisa ran the school for the human children on the colony. 23 families had made this distant world their home, bringing 42 children of various ages. The Zephyrians had been puzzled by this arrangement at first. Their young were raised in collective units until they reached working age. Inside the school, Jake found Lisa reading to a group of younger children. Her gentle voice filled the room as she told them about Earth's ancient forests. His daughter Amy sat in the front row, her brown eyes wide with wonder. At 12, she was one of the older children, but she still loved story time. "Dad?" Amy jumped up when she saw him. "Mom was telling us about the great redwood trees." "Did you really climb them when you were little?" "A few times," Jake said, ruffling her hair, "though your grandmother wasn't too happy about it." Lisa closed the book and smiled at her husband. "What brings you here so early?" "Administrator Vexstar wants to see me." "Another inspection, I think." Amy made a face. "He's always inspecting things. Ben says his dad thinks the Zephyrians count every grain of dirt we move." "That's not far from wrong," Jake said quietly to Lisa. "I better go see what he wants." Jake walked across the colony to the administrative complex. The building looked like all Zephyrian architecture. Clean lines, no decoration, perfectly functional. He found Vexstar in his office, standing behind a desk that held neat stacks of data tablets. Vexstar was typical of his species, nearly 7 feet tall, with blue-gray skin that looked almost metallic. His large eyes never seemed to blink, and his movements were always deliberate. He wore the dark uniform of a collective administrator, marked with symbols that showed his rank. "Commander Morrison," Vexstar said without looking up, "I have received reports of irregular activity in Sector 7. "What kind of irregular activity?" "Unauthorized personnel in restricted areas. Movement patterns that do not match work schedules. Food supplies being diverted from the main stores." Jake frowned. Sector 7 was near the mining operation, but mostly unused. "I haven't heard any reports from my people." "Are you sure about this?" "Zephyrian sensors do not make errors," Vexstar said coldly. "I will conduct a full inspection this afternoon. All personnel must account for their activities. Of course, we'll cooperate fully." Jake left the meeting feeling uneasy. His people were good workers and followed the rules. What could be happening in Sector 7? Meanwhile, in an abandoned storage building in that same sector, Amy Morrison crouched beside a makeshift bed made from old blankets. On the bed lay a small creature about the size of a house cat. It had soft gray fur and large dark eyes that looked up at her with trust. "How is he today?" asked Ben Carter, sliding through the door. At 10, Ben was small for his age, but had a clever mind that got him into and out of trouble regularly. "Better, I think," Amy whispered. "The cut on his leg isn't bleeding anymore." Lucy, Davis, and Sam Rodriguez followed Ben inside. Lucy, 11 years old with red hair and freckles, carried a small container of water. Sam, the youngest at 9, held a piece of bread he had saved from breakfast. "My mom will notice if I keep taking food," Sam said nervously. "We only need to help him a few more days," Amy assured him. "Then he'll be strong enough to go back to his family." The children had found the injured Quillen 3 days ago, while exploring near the mining site. The small alien creature had been caught in some discarded machinery, its leg badly cut. Amy had wanted to tell her parents immediately, but Ben had reminded them about the rules. Collective Law 847C was very clear. No one was allowed to interact with local wildlife without proper authorization. The Zephyrians enforced this rule strictly. Any violation meant punishment for the entire family responsible. But Amy couldn't just leave the creature to die. It reminded her of the rabbits she used to care for on Earth before her family moved to the colony. Its eyes held the same scared but hopeful look. "He's so small," Lucy said softly, gently stroking the Quillen's fur. "I can't believe anyone would make a law against helping something so helpless." "The Zephyrians don't understand," Amy said. "They think rules are more important than doing what's right." The Quillen made a soft chirping sound and tried to stand. Its injured leg was much stronger now, and it could put weight on it without falling. "Look," Sam pointed excitedly. "He's getting better." Ben warned. "We can't be too loud. If anyone finds us here, ... They all knew what would happen. The Zephyrians would separate the creature from them immediately. Worse, their families might be forced to leave the colony. Amy's father worked hard to keep the peace between humans and Zephyrians. This could ruin everything, but as Amy watched the little Quillen try to walk, she knew they had made the right choice. Some things were more important than rules. The storage building, a Zephyrian patrol drone hovered silently, its sensors recording everything. The children had no idea they were being watched. That afternoon, Vextar led his inspection team through Sector 7. He moved with typical Zephyrian precision, checking every building and storage unit. His pale blue skin seemed to glow in the afternoon light as he consulted his data tablet. "This unit shows signs of recent entry," he announced, pointing to the storage building where the children had been hiding. Jake followed behind the inspection team, growing more worried with each step. Whatever his people had been doing, he hoped it wasn't serious enough to cause real trouble. Vextar activated the building's locks with an override code. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the inspection team found the makeshift bed, empty food containers, and clear signs that someone had been using the space regularly. But they found something else too. In the corner, the little Quillen cowered behind a pile of blankets, its dark eyes wide with fear. "Unauthorized wildlife." "Interaction," Vextar stated, his voice carrying no emotion. "Violation of Collective Law 847C. The perpetrators must be identified and detained immediately." Jake stared at the small creature in shock. It was clearly injured and had been receiving care. Someone had been helping it, breaking one of the most serious laws on the colony. "Administrator, surely we can discuss this," Jake began. "There is nothing to discuss." Vextar cut him off. "The law is absolute. Find who did this, or I will begin random detentions of all human families." As if summoned by the commotion, Amy and her 3 friends appeared at the building entrance. They had heard the voices and come to check on their patient. Now they stood frozen, staring at the inspection team surrounding their secret. Amy stepped forward, her chin raised with determination that reminded Jake painfully of her mother. "We did it," she said clearly. "We found him hurt, and we helped him get better. And we're not sorry." Vextar's large eyes fixed on the children with cold calculation. "You are confessing to violation of Collective Law 847C? If helping someone who's hurt is against the law," Ben said, moving to stand beside Amy, "then yes." Lucy and Sam joined them, forming a small line of defiant children facing the tall Zephyrian administrator. Vextar consulted his data tablet. Children aged 9 to 12. Under collective law, age is not a factor in criminal violations. You will all be detained pending formal charges. Wait, Jake stepped forward. They're just kids. They didn't understand the law. Ignorance is not an excuse. The law applies equally to all residents of this colony. Vexstar signaled to his security team. Prepare transport to the detention facility. Jake watched in horror as Zephyrian guards moved toward his daughter and her friends. In trying to save one small creature, the children had created a crisis that would shake the entire galaxy. The detention transport lifted off from Kepler 442b with 4 human children inside. Amy Morrison pressed her face against the small window, watching her home grow smaller below. Ben Carter sat beside her, trying to look brave even though his hands shook. Lucy Davis held Sam Rodriguez's hand as the youngest boy fought back tears. Jake Morrison stood on the landing pad, his fists clenched as he watched the ship disappear into the sky. Lisa ran up behind him, her face pale with fear. "Where are they? Taking our children?" she demanded. Vexstar consulted his data tablet without looking at the desperate parents. "Detention Facility Omega-7 on the moon. They will remain there until trial." "A trial?" Jake's voice rose. "They're children. Amy is only 12 years old. Age is irrelevant under collective law," Vexstar replied coldly. "They committed a crime. They will face justice." Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. "We have to contact Earth. Someone has to help us." Across the galaxy, news of the children's arrest spread like wildfire through human space. The quantum communication networks carried the story from world to world in a matter of hours. On Earth, Ambassador Helen Brooks received the urgent message. In her office at the Global Diplomatic Center. "4 children?" she asked her aide, reading the report again. "Arrested for helping an injured animal?" "Yes, ma'am. The Zephyrian Collective is treating them as adult criminals under their law system." Helen stood up from her desk, her face grim. "Get me a direct line to the Zephyrian homeworld, and contact President Williams immediately." Meanwhile, at the Galactic University on Centauri Prime, Dr. Paul Martinez was finishing his evening lecture on comparative psychology when his assistant rushed into the classroom. "Professor, you need to see this news report," the young man said, handing him a data pad. Paul read the story with growing amazement and horror. For 3 years, he had been studying the differences between human and alien child development. His research showed that human children had unique emotional responses that other species lacked. "This is exactly what I've been trying to prove," he said quietly. "Human children aren't just small adults. They're fundamentally different." That night, Paul worked frantically on a new research paper. He pulled together years of data about human psychology, brain development, and emotional growth. His findings were clear. Human children possessed an innate drive toward empathy and caregiving that didn't fully develop in other species until much later, if at all. In space near the Zephyrian border, Captain Roy Fletcher received new orders aboard his ship, the Liberty. The Earth defense vessel had been on routine patrol when the emergency message arrived. "Captain," his communications officer, LT, Chris Evans, called out, "we're being ordered to take position near Zephyrian space. It's related to those children who were arrested." Roy studied the orders on his command screen. "Dr. Walsh, what do? You know about Zephyrian detention facilities?" Chief Medical Officer Dr. Nina Walsh looked up from her medical reports. "They're designed for adult Zephyrian physiology. Cold temperatures, high gravity, food that would be toxic to humans. Children wouldn't survive long in those conditions." "Then we better hope this gets resolved quickly," Roy muttered. Back on Kepler 442b, Lisa Morrison had gathered all the human families in the community center. Word had spread quickly about what happened to the children. Parents held their own. Kids close, fear clear in their eyes. "We can't let them treat our children like criminals," Lisa said to the crowd. Amy and her friends were doing what any human child would do. They saw something hurt, and they helped it. But what can we do? Asked Elena Carter, Men's mother. The Zephyrians control this colony. We protest, Lisa said firmly. Peacefully, but we make it clear that this is wrong. Outside the community center, several alien colonists had gathered. Thrall, an Andorian engineer, stepped forward. His blue skin was marked with the ritual scars of his people, and his white hair showed his age and experience. I have worked with humans for many cycles, he said in his deep voice. Your young are different from ours. They feel things we do not understand, but perhaps we should try to understand. Kenti, a Centaurian trader, nodded agreement. Her four arms gestured expressively as she spoke. My people value logic above all else. But what these children did was logical. An injured creature needed help. They provided it. This should be praised, not punished. The news reached the Interstellar News Network headquarters within 6 hours. Reporter Alex Stone had built his career covering interspecies conflicts, but this story was different. He stared at the footage of 4 small human children being led away in restraints designed for adult prisoners. This isn't just a legal dispute, he told his editor. This could change how the galaxy views humanity entirely. Alex immediately began investigating the case. He interviewed xenopsychologists, legal experts, and human families throughout the galaxy. What he discovered amazed him. Human children were unique in the galaxy. While other species treated their young as incomplete adults, humans recognized childhood as a distinct phase of development. Human children showed levels of empathy and compassion that most adult aliens never achieved. On the detention facility's moon, Amy and her friends huddled together in a cell designed for creatures twice their size. The temperature was barely above freezing, and the artificial gravity was set too high for their small bodies. They had been given 1 meal of Zephyrian food that tasted like bitter metal and made Sam sick. I want to go home, Sam whispered, tears running down his face. We all do, Amy said, putting her arm around him. But we did the right thing. That little Quillen is alive because we helped him. Do you think our parents know where we are? Lucy asked. Ben tried to sound confident. Of course they do. My mom won't let them keep us here. Neither will Amy's dad. But privately, Ben was scared. The guards who had brought them food couldn't understand human speech. They treated the children exactly like adult prisoners, with no recognition that they might need different care. Dr. Paul Martinez finished his research paper just as the Galactic News Networks began broadcasting the story. His timing couldn't have been better. Within hours of publication, human juvenile psychology and the moral imperative was being downloaded by scientists, diplomats, and curious citizens across dozens of worlds. The paper explained that human children weren't just physically smaller than adults. Their brains were fundamentally different, wired for learning, empathy, and moral development. What the 4 children had done wasn't criminal behavior. It was exactly what healthy human children were supposed to do when faced with suffering. Ambassador Helen Brooks used Paul's research in her emergency communication to the Zephyrian government. These aren't criminals, she argued to the Collective Council. They're children following their biological programming to help others. Punishing them for this is like punishing a bird for flying. But the Zephyrian response was cold and predictable. Law is law, came the official reply. These humans violated our regulations. They will face trial as adults. The response triggered something unprecedented in galactic politics. For the first time in over a century, multiple species began questioning Zephyrian authority. The Andorians recalled their trade ambassador. The Centaurians suspended 3 major contracts. Even the usually neutral vegans issued a statement of concern. President Karen Williams called an emergency session of Earth's Global Assembly. Standing before representatives from every human world, she made a declaration that would echo across the galaxy. No civilized society imprisons children for acts of compassion, she announced. If the Zephyrian collective cannot recognize the difference between criminal behavior and moral courage, then we cannot continue our association with them. The president announced immediate economic sanctions against the Zephyrians and the recall of human participation from 3 major galactic trade agreements. Within hours, human ships began leaving Zephyrian space, and human workers started abandoning collective projects. But in the detention facility, 4 small human children remained trapped in conditions that grew more dangerous by the hour. Amy had developed a cough from the cold. Sam could barely keep any food down. Lucy's lips were turning blue, and Ben was having trouble staying awake in the heavy gravity. Time was running out, and the galaxy was beginning to understand that something precious and innocent was at stake. The outrage was just beginning to build. The galactic news networks couldn't stop talking about the 4 human children. Every day brought new footage of Amy, Ben, Lucy, and Sam being led into the detention facility. The images of small figures in oversized restraints shocked species across the galaxy who had never really thought about the concept of childhood. On the planet Altair Prime, the philosopher Zenda Mole watched the broadcasts with growing fascination. The elderly Altarian had spent 3 centuries studying different forms of consciousness, but human children presented something entirely new to his understanding. These young humans display behavioral patterns we abandoned long ago, he wrote in his daily journal. They act from emotion rather than logic, yet their choices often prove more moral than our calculated decisions. Zender began publishing essays comparing human children to the Altarian growth phase. His people had once shown similar emotional responses during their development, but centuries of emphasis on pure logic had suppressed these traits. Now he wondered if they had lost something important. On Vega 6, Dr. Yiltar Ven made an even more startling discovery. The vegan scientist had been studying her own species' development patterns when the news about human children reached her. World. Digging through old biological records, she found evidence that young vegans once showed empathetic behaviors similar to human children. We trained it out of them, she told her research team. For generations, we've been conditioning our young to suppress emotional responses. But these humans celebrate and nurture such behavior in their children. Her findings created a sensation among vegan intellectuals. Some began questioning whether their society's emphasis on emotional control had actually harmed their development. As a species. Meanwhile, on Kepler 442b, Dr. Elena Carter was making her own important discovery. Ben's mother had spent days studying the area where the children found the injured Quillen. What she found changed everything. "Jake," she called excitedly as she ran into the colony's command center. "You need to see this." She led Jake and several other colonists to the mining site where the children had first discovered the creature. There, in a clearing near the excavation area, they found something remarkable. A whole family of Quillens had gathered around the spot where the children had built their secret shelter. "They're not just random animals," Elena explained breathlessly. "They're a family unit. The one the children saved was a juvenile, and now the entire pack has come looking for it." The adult Quillens were larger than the injured one, with thicker fur and more confident movements. They moved through the area carefully, making soft chirping sounds that seemed almost like communication. "This is incredible," Jake said, watching the creatures. "In 3 years of operation, we've never seen them show this kind of social behavior." "Because we never gave them a reason to trust us," Elena replied. "But the children did something different. They showed compassion to one of their young, and now the whole family knows humans can be trusted." The discovery had immediate implications for the colony. The Quillen's behavior patterns could provide valuable insights into the planet's ecosystem. More importantly, it proved that the children's actions had actually benefited the entire colony's research mission. But the children couldn't know about this breakthrough. In the detention facility, their condition was getting worse each day. Amy's cough had turned into a fever that left her shivering constantly. The Zephyrian medical systems couldn't properly diagnose human illnesses, let alone treat them. On Earth, President Karen Williams received daily medical reports from Dr. Nina Walsh aboard the Liberty. The ship's long-range sensors could detect the children's vital signs from a distance, and the readings were alarming. They're suffering from hypothermia, malnutrition, and respiratory distress, Dr. Walsh reported during a secure communication. If they don't receive proper medical care soon, we could lose them. The president's face was grim as she ended the call. She immediately contacted the Zephyrian government directly, demanding medical access to the children. The response was predictably cold. "A facility provides adequate care for all detainees," came the official reply. "No special accommodations will be made." That response triggered a much stronger reaction from Earth. President Williams announced that all human trade with the Zephyrian collective would cease immediately. More importantly, she authorized Captain Fletcher to position the Liberty at the edge of Zephyrian space as a show of force. The move sent shockwaves through galactic politics. Never before had one species threatened military action over the treatment of children. Many alien governments weren't sure how to respond to such an unprecedented situation. Captain Danny Williams, Elena Carter's brother, was commanding a merchant vessel called the Phoenix when he received word about his nephew Ben's condition. Danny had served in the Earth Defense Force before becoming a trader, and he still had connections throughout human space. "I'm not waiting for diplomats to fix this," he told his crew. "Those kids need help now." Despite orders to avoid Zephyrian space, Danny loaded the Phoenix with medical supplies and headed for the detention facility. He knew it was dangerous, but the thought of children suffering in alien custody made the risk worthwhile. The Phoenix wasn't the only human ship moving toward Zephyrian territory. Captain Roy Fletcher, aboard the Liberty, had been joined by 6 other Earth-Defense vessels. The small fleet took position just outside Zephyrian space, close enough to respond quickly if needed. The situation escalated when Administrator Vexstar announced that the children would stand trial within days. Under Zephyrian law, they would be treated as adult criminals and could face years of imprisonment if found guilty. Lisa Morrison organized the largest protest in the colony's history. Nearly every human family participated, along with dozens of sympathetic alien workers. They marched peacefully through the colony center, carrying signs demanding the children's release. "These are our children," Lisa announced to the gathered crowd. They did nothing wrong except show compassion to a helpless creature. If that's a crime in this galaxy, then we're all criminals. The protest was broadcast live across multiple worlds by reporter Alex Stone and his news team. The images of human families demanding their children's freedom touched something deep in species that had never considered the unique bond between human parents and their young. On the ancient world of Keeper Prime, Elder Turvel watched the broadcasts with interest. The Keepers rarely involved themselves in galactic politics, preferring to observe from a distance. But this situation was different. For the first time in centuries, Turval felt compelled to act. "Summon the council," he told his aides. "We have remained silent too long while injustice unfolds before us." The Keepers' announcement that they would address the Galactic Council sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. The ancient species hadn't spoken publicly in over 200 years. Their decision to break their silence now indicated just how serious the situation had become. Back in the detention facility, Amy Morrison struggled to stay conscious as her fever worsened. She could hear Ben coughing in the next cell, and Lucy, trying to comfort Sam as he cried for his parents. The children had been brave for as long as they could, but their strength was fading. "We saved him," Amy whispered to herself, thinking about the little Quillen they had helped. "No matter what happens to us, we saved him." Outside the facility, Danny Williams' ship Phoenix had joined Captain Fletcher's fleet. More human vessels arrived each day, forming an unofficial blockade around the detention facility. The standoff was becoming dangerous, with both sides refusing to back down. The galaxy held its breath as the crisis reached its breaking point. 4 small human children had become the center of the greatest diplomatic crisis in generations, and their lives hung in the balance as ancient powers prepared to clash over the meaning of justice and compassion. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began at dawn on Centauri Prime. Representatives from 47 species filled the great chamber, their voices creating a buzz of nervous energy. Ambassador Helen Brooks sat in the human section, her hands folded tightly as she prepared for the most important speech of her career. At the center of the chamber, a massive screen showed live footage from the detention facility. The 4 human children lay in their cells, barely moving. Amy's fever had gotten worse during the night, and the facility's medical system still couldn't help her. Elder Turville of the Keepers entered the chamber like a walking piece of history. His ancient species rarely left their homeworld, and many of the younger delegates had never seen a keeper in person. He was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow in the chamber's lights. His eyes held the wisdom of millennia. "Honored delegates," Turville began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "For over 2,000 years, my people have watched the rise and fall of civilizations. We have seen species learn to cooperate, and we have seen them destroy each other through ignorance." The chamber fell completely silent. When a keeper spoke, the galaxy listened. Today, we witness something that shames us all. 4 young beings are dying because one species cannot understand the concept of compassion. These human children did what their nature commanded them to do. They saw suffering and they acted to end it. Turval's gaze swept across the chamber, stopping at the Zephyrian delegation. Any species that would punish children for acts of mercy has forgotten what it means to be civilized. The Zephyrian representative, Advisor Kelter Voss, stood to respond. "The keepers speak of mercy, but law must be absolute. If we make exceptions for some, then law has no meaning. And if law has no room for compassion," Turville replied, "then law itself has no meaning." Ambassador Brooks rose to address the council. Behind her, the screen showed Dr. Paul Martinez's research data about human child development. Charts and graphs demonstrated how human children's brains were wired differently than adult minds. "These children didn't break your law out of defiance," Helen said to the assembly. "They broke it because their biology demands that they help others in need. Punishing them for this is like punishing a flower for growing toward sunlight." She gestured to the screen, where footage showed the Quillen family still gathered near the colony. Moreover, their actions have created unprecedented research opportunities. The creatures they saved have led to scientific discoveries that benefit everyone. As Helen spoke, alarms began sounding in the chamber. Emergency broadcasts interrupted the session as news arrived from the detention facility. Captain Danny Williams had broken through the Zephyrian security perimeter with his ship Phoenix, demanding medical access to the children. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. Other human ships were moving to support the Phoenix, while Zephyrian patrol vessels surrounded the detention facility. The galaxy was minutes away from its first military conflict in over a century. Administrator Vexstar received the emergency communication at his office on Kepler 442b. The colony had become a focal point of galactic attention, with news crews from dozens of species broadcasting from the settlement. The pressure was overwhelming, even his rigid Zephyrian composure. "Sir," his aide reported nervously, The Collective Council is demanding immediate resolution. The economic sanctions are severely damaging our trade networks. Vextar studied the reports on his desk. 12 species had suspended trade agreements with the Zephyrians. The Andorians had recalled their engineering teams from 3 major projects. Even the normally neutral vegans were questioning their relationship with the Collective. And the human ships? Vextar asked. 17 vessels now surround the detention facility. They're demanding medical access to the prisoners. At the detention facility, Dr. Nina Walsh beamed directly from the Liberty to the prison complex despite Zephyrian protests. She carried only medical supplies and moved with the authority of someone who wouldn't be stopped. Where are the children? She demanded of the confused guards. The Zephyrian facility commander tried to block her path. You have no authority here. Leave immediately. Those children are dying, Nina said firmly. I'm a doctor, and I'm treating them whether you like it or not. Behind her, more human personnel were beaming down from the surrounding ships. The Zephyrians found themselves facing a peaceful but determined invasion of medical personnel and diplomats. Jake, Morrison, and Lisa arrived with the second wave of transporters. They pushed past the guards toward their daughter's cell, their faces showing the fear and desperation of parents who had been separated from their child. Amy, Lisa called out as they reached the detention area. The girl looked up weakly from her makeshift bed. Her fever had broken sometime during the night, but she was still pale and shaky. Mom? Dad? Is that really you? We're here, sweetheart, Jake said, kneeling beside her cell. We're going to get you out of this place. Elena Carter found her son Ben in the next cell. The boy was trying to take care of Sam Rodriguez, who had been sick for days. Lucy Davis sat nearby, her lips blue from the cold, but her spirit unbroken. Are we in trouble? Ben asked his mother. No, honey, Elena said, tears running down her face. You're heroes, all of you. Dr. Walsh quickly assessed the children's condition. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, and respiratory distress, she reported. They need immediate transport to proper medical facilities. The facility commander stepped forward. These prisoners cannot be removed without proper authorization. Authorization? Lisa Morrison turned on him with fury that surprised everyone present. These are children. They're sick and scared, and you've been torturing them for days. Her. Words were broadcast live across the galaxy as news crews captured every moment of the confrontation. The image of a desperate mother protecting her children resonated with species who had never understood parental bonds before Dot in the Galactic Council chamber. The live broadcasts from the detention facility played on every screen. Delegates watched in amazement as human parents fought through armed guards to reach their children. Several Zephyrian guards at the facility began refusing orders. Watching the reunion between parents and children had affected them more than they expected. Some had never seen such emotional bonds before, and they were beginning to understand what they had been preventing. Stand down, one guard told his commander. I will not point a weapon at younglings anymore. The moment of truth came when Administrator Vextar himself arrived at the facility. He had come to reassert Zephyrian authority, but what he found was chaos. Human medical teams were treating the children while their parents stood protectively nearby. His own guards were refusing to intervene. This is a violation of collective authority, Vextar announced. Elder Torval materialized in the facilities. Main chamber, having transported directly from the council session. His presence made even Vextar step backward. Administrator, the ancient keeper said quietly, you have a choice to make. You can continue this path and face the united opposition of most civilized species. Or you can choose wisdom and allow these children to return to their families. Vextar looked around the chamber. His guards wouldn't meet his eyes. The human parents stood together, protecting their children with fierce determination. Outside, 17 human ships waited for his decision. The law. He began weakly. Will be changed, Terval said firmly. The Council has already begun drafting new protections for juvenile members of all species. Your law will become obsolete within days. Slowly, Vextar reached for his communications device. Release the prisoners, he ordered. All charges are dropped. The celebration was immediate and overwhelming. Parents embraced their children while news crews broadcast the moment across the galaxy. Amy Morrison hugged her father tightly, finally safe in his arms. We did the right thing, didn't we, Dad? She asked. Yes, sweetheart, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. You did exactly the right thing. 6 months later, the colony on Kepler 442b had become a model for interspecies cooperation. The Quillen Preserve, established with the children first, found their injured friend, attracted researchers from dozens of worlds. Amy and her friends had become unlikely celebrities, invited to speak at schools across human space about compassion and courage. The Galactic Council had passed the Kepler Accords, establishing universal protections for children and recognizing acts of compassion as legally protected behavior. Vextar had been reassigned to a research position, while the Zephyrian Collective began a cultural revolution, examining their treatment of their own young dot in the preserve. Amy sat with her friends, watching the Quillen family play in the afternoon sun. The little creature they had saved now ran happily with its siblings, completely healed. Do you think we really changed things? Lucy asked. Look around, Ben said, pointing to the mixed group of human and alien children playing nearby. I think we changed everything. Above them, ships from dozens of species arrived daily, their crews eager to learn about human approaches to child-rearing and compassion. The galaxy had been outraged by the imprisonment of 4 human children, but that outrage had become the catalyst for a new era of understanding among the stars.